Hello, listeners. It's Mallory Wilsey, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a moment to tell you about another show on Enrollify that I know you'll love. Mastering the Next is a cutting edge podcast exploring the future of graduate, online, and non traditional education through the lens of technology and artificial intelligence. Staying competitive in the world of graduate student recruitment and enrollment means keeping up with the ever evolving tech trends in higher ed. Join Dr. Ray Lutsky, VP of Strategic Partnerships at Element 451, as he explores what's next at the dynamic intersection of student recruitment and leading edge technology. Each episode will explore future trends and the technologies shaping the academic landscape of the 21st century. Listeners will be equipped with strategies to meet the evolving needs of today's online and non traditional learners. New episodes drop every other Friday, and you can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Mastering the Next wherever you get your podcasts.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Navigating International Recruitment, a special 5-part pulse check series where we dive deep into the ever-changing currents of global student recruitment and support. I'm your host, Kin Sejpal at the University of Redlands, and I'm thrilled to be your guide through this journey that is also very deeply personal to me. There is no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to attracting and supporting international students. Each country, continent, and culture presents its own unique set of circumstances. In the next few episodes, my hope is to bring in expertise who will help uncover innovative strategies and best practices that will empower you to not only attract international students, but also to create an inclusive and supportive environment where they can thrive. Join me as we embark on this journey together, exploring the boundless opportunities that international education offers. Hi, Ruby. Nice to see you.
Yes, hello.
Thanks so much for being part of the Navigating International Recruitment podcast series. And I'm so happy that our mutual colleague, Day Kibbles, recommended that I speak to you. And once I learned about you and about Soka University, I was like, I have to have you on this podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Likewise. So, this podcast is really about international students, and Soka University is highly reputable when it comes to serving international students. I mean, it serves as many international students as domestic students from what I read online, and you can, you know, get into the specifics there if you want. But tell me, how does that even happen? Was it intentional? Was it organic? How did it become such a popular destination for international students to seek education and higher education, particularly?
Yeah, I would definitely say it was intentional and really mission driven. Soka University of America, we're deeply guided by our mission, which is to foster a steady stream of global citizens committed to living a contributive life. So, from the start of the university, it was really important for us to have a diverse student body on campus that really represented global perspectives and cultures and languages. So, from the beginning, I think it was very intentional to bring in international students. And even when you come onto campus, you can feel the mission represented sort of visually across our campus from when you enter Founders Hall in the first building, when you enter the university, there's a world map on the floor. And it's a world map which has the Pacific Basin at the center, which is different from a lot of other maps that a lot of times don't have the Pacific Basin as the center. And, even our academic buildings around campus are named after, incredible global citizens who've significantly contributed to the world, people like Wangari Maathai, Linus Pauling, Mahatma Gandhi, and of course the founder of institution Daisaku Ikeda. So really, across the campus, you can feel our mission statement. And I think that really draws so many international students. And then of course, our faculty, staff, and most importantly, our students really live and embody our mission as well. And so yeah, I think from the very beginning, having the representation of both domestic and international students was part of our DNA. So it's absolutely by design, to ensure that those diverse perspectives are represented as we develop these global citizens. So I really think it's truly what makes Soka so unique is really our students who deeply are passionate about contributing to the society as a whole.
Yeah, I love that. And, every institution obviously has a mission statement, but very few, I would say, are living it and breathing it. And it feels very genuine and authentic to who they are. In your case, it really just feels like it's innate to who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, even the staff I mentioned, we're here because we're drawn to the mission, right?
Mm,
So it really guides so much of what we do. And then I think actually another point that really allows us to be a destination for international students seeking a US education is actually how generous our financial aid is. So, for example, we have something called the Soka Opportunity Grant, which kind of ensures that all admitted undergrad students whose family incomes are less than 90,000 and who have a demonstrated financial need, don't have to pay any tuition out of pocket. And for those students, tuition is fully covered, whether they're domestic, international, it doesn't matter. And students with higher demonstrated financial need also qualify for even more aid, such as living expenses, books, transportation, all of that. So SUA's, generous need-based aid is also something that even if, your family makes more than 90,000, there's sort of need blind scholarship opportunities. There's the merit scholarship. We have a DEI scholarship. So the sort of list goes on and on. And I think what makes us especially unique is our Soka loan, and that's available to international students and Dreamer students. Yeah,
mhm.
which supports these populations, which traditionally, you would have to have your tuition and costs, upfront. But with these Soka loans for these populations, they're able to receive an education as well. So I think that's also something that makes us so unique and accessible to international students.
I was just going to use that word, and which I love that you use that because accessibility is such a core value proposition of higher education, of a lot of higher education, maybe less so with certain elite schools, but I think accessibility for international students is rare to find. And to be able to afford them the scholarship opportunities and aid opportunities akin to what domestic students get, I think that is also unique, and that again speaks to the fact that y'all are walking the walk and walking the talk even when it comes to serving international students and treating them as very similar if not same in terms of at least when it comes to affordability and accessibility to domestic students.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually talking to one international student who just graduated, but she was reflecting on her time as a student, and she really shared like compared when you really make the currency exchange, everything is 7 times more expensive in the US,
Yeah.
so finances is such a big part of her ability to access higher ed in the US. And so she was just filled with so much gratitude for all the opportunities that she received, being able to afford an education in the
Yeah,
US. So
that brings back memories and not very fond ones of coming to the US for the first time and doing the currency exchange for even a McDonald's, which I'm like, okay, I'll do the fries. I'll start
yeah,
there, and
yeah.
then being like doing the math and being like, okay, well, does anyone want to share that with me?
Yeah.
But absolutely, it's not just the cost of education and higher education; it's a cost of American higher education, which comes with its own sort of feeling of whoa, especially
Right.
depending on obviously the value of the economy where you come from. But generally speaking, there are going to be a lot of students that come for economic mobility and who will be looking at that price tag and doing that math. So when it comes to admissions and recruitment, I know first of all, pandemic, which seems forever ago, wasn't that long ago, especially when you think about the recruitment cycle. How did that impact international admissions, and how do you help international students with things related to admissions? Because even getting here sometimes can be quite an ordeal.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we did during that time is making standardized tests optional, which is wonderful. It removes a barrier, especially for international students who have to sometimes travel 3, 4 hours or even to a different country to be able to take a certain standardized test. So that test optional has really helped international students. But one thing that I think is pretty incredible recently that the institution was able to do is we hired our own credential analyst. So in previous years, international students, they had to ensure that, however much money, $200-300, to make sure that their credentials were translated into the US standards, right? And so that was a huge barrier for international students to be able to even apply from the very beginning. And so with bringing on this credential analyst, we're removing this financial barrier from the very beginning. So actually our applicant pool just skyrocketed because we removed this barrier. So we're already seeing the results of these efforts in our application pool.
That's amazing. Yeah, this is something that I feel like different countries treat education differently in terms of just what their education model is and what is considered as high school, what is considered as transcript. There's just all, sometimes this is a lingo that not everybody uses even. So the fact that you have somebody who can take that information and make it almost US equivalent, it sounds like, to kind of say, okay, this is how your credentials apply to your admissions process, is what I'm understanding you are doing with this position. I think that it, in and of itself, is not only a financial savings for the students, but it's just a compassionate, empathetic way to approach admissions, because it's so stressful otherwise to really understand what is and isn't needed. And do I have to study an extra year, or do I have to take an extra test, or how do I make myself eligible for education, and be at an equal playing field as others? So, in your role, so for those who don't know, so Ruby is the director for student leadership and engagement. So, what has been your role in sort of fostering this culture that you have? Because obviously, people are coming to you, and they're staying. You have a good retention rate, not just recruitment. So, how are you creating that culture of inclusion for international students when you know half, if not more, of your student body is international? How does that look different, and how do you kind of help shape that culture where you are?
We have something that we use often. We say culture of care on our campus, and we're a very small institution. We serve a small student body. So, because of that, we're able to be such a high touch institution. And so this culture
Mm-hmm.
of care is really important to us. We talk about it all the time. And in many ways, in my work, and it's not just me, truly, it's across the institution, how do we express our care to every individual student is such a big part of what we do. And of course, at larger institutions, you just don't have the ability to look at each person, their name, their background, what their needs are. But because of our sort of small campus size, we're able to really almost ensure that there's no students falling between the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an incredible opportunity to express this culture of care. And I think it's part of the DNA, again, as we foster global citizens. How do we foster leaders who are compassionate and caring, and how do we express that in the institution, and how do students learn that, of course, from the institution, but through each other? And so even in my work, I think that's driven a lot of what I've done, in my career. From I started in residential life, and now I'm, the director of student leadership and service engagement. So much of what I do is really based on this expression of care and looking at individual student needs.
Yeah. So you're in student affairs, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that is interesting too, because student affairs are professionals. Obviously, they work a lot with current students, and I mean, everyone should be a retention champion, but student affairs are most certainly closest to kind of understanding the day to day pains and joys of students in general. And then when it comes to international students, though, they come with challenges. They have challenges. I have been one. I know many who have those challenges that are quite different from the domestic audience. So, but at Soka, I feel like, given all the things that you and I have talked about previously, it's not so much there. I mean, I feel like they find that home away from home, and the challenges that international students typically face in an American school are less obvious, at least at Soka. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much that I can share. I think international students are so much of our student population and demographic. And so we don't think of international students as kind of a separate group that we need to provide a service for, right? They are a large part of our institution, almost 50% of our student body. And so in everything that we do, we're thinking about our students and we're thinking about our international students. And like you said, there's so much built in that we do, I oftentimes we don't think this is a service we're providing international students because it's just built into who we are. And so I
Mm,
can think of so many different examples of sort of how we do that. But it really, I think, truly comes from an equity lens. So one of the first things from, the sort of start of our institution, I'm actually an alum of the university as well. So I can speak to my experience both as a student and then as a staff. I've been at the institution as an employee, as a staff member for the last 17 years, going on 18. But also, I can speak to my experience as a student. And, some of the built in parts, for example, is that we provide a laptop for all students when they enter. It's part of their tuition. They don't have to worry about sort of a technological gap in their ability to learn. We ensure that all students have, as much as possible, this sort of equitable starting point. There's no parking fees, they don't have to pay for laundry, printing is included. Even things like, my career began in residential life. And so much of what we do, again, is really, I never used to think it was specifically for international students because it's for all students. But now I realize how much it benefits this population. We have winter and summer housing available, so students never have
yes.
to leave.
Oh my God,
They don't
that's
have to find a
huge.
place. Yeah, it's so huge. So yeah, we actually have students who aren't able to afford to go home in the summer, so then they're able to pay for summer housing, which is incredibly affordable over the summertime and stay on campus. And then we also have summer storage, which is pretty incredible. So they
Oh,
don't have to
that
go
is
in.
great.
Yeah, they don't have to move everything out and come back. They can store their items within the residence halls over the summertime and not have to worry about that. So, so much of what's built in and baked into the institution is with that population in mind.
Yeah, I can't imagine, some of the things that you said, they might sound small, but they are actually barriers, because I remember, and I know that this to be true even recently, that especially winter break is it is so hard to know what to do. It's such a short time between semesters to do something meaningful in terms of like internship or something of that sort. It is also falls during the holiday season when there really isn't much going on in terms of employment in general. And then if you want to travel, everything is so pricey, and that's peak season for that. And so even if you want to travel home or travel somewhere else, it's just so difficult. And so the question becomes like, okay, what do I do? Where do I stay? Will I get housing? Will I have storage? I mean, things that not every institution thinks about, you've definitely factored in. And I'm assuming food is another aspect you think about a lot. I know international students in particular. I mean, food is just such an important component of any college experience for students too, but they have different needs and different dietary preferences, or some in some cases even dietary needs. So I'm sure that's something you'll think about as well.
Hey, it's Mallory, Chief Strategist of Enrollify. Why travel far when an exceptional higher ed conference experience awaits from the comfort of your campus or home office? I'm thrilled to announce that every single session at the 2024 Engage Summit will be live streamed. And the best part? Registration is free. Many of your favorite Enrollify creators are presenting. Maya Demishkovich and Jenny Lee Fowler will teach you how to craft an AI-powered social media influencer strategy. Jamie Hunt will help you unlock the AI revolution in your team. And Shane Baglini and Allison Tercio are teaming up to boost your productivity with generative AI. Plan out your dream conference by scoping out the agenda and taking note of the sessions you want to tune in for. Visit engage.element451.com and register yourself and your team for free today. Now, back to the show.
Absolutely. One of the sort of the founder of the institution, Daisaku Ikeda, one of the first things he asked is, I really leave the curriculum and all of that, to those who are the professionals. But one thing that I really ask in the establishment of this university to really ensure that these students can learn is to ensure that they have, a wonderful place to stay where they can come home and relax and really study and focus on studying, and also good food. Those were his two major requests. And so actually all students, they have, for example, first years, they come in, they have one roommate and they have their own bathroom and, quite a spacious space. And then of course, second, third, and fourth year, they have suite mates. So they have their own room and a private bathroom that they share with their suite mate. So, really a place where they can focus on their academics. And then of course, food, as you mentioned, we have Bon Appetit services. And, one thing that's so awesome is that they really try to incorporate international cuisines, throughout the year. And actually, I remember even as a student, they would ask for recipes from individuals who wanted to share recipes from home that they can try and recreate.
Oh, that is so
And
fun.
yeah, actually, my sister was at the university and she submitted a recipe, and her name is Julie. And they had one time they had Julie's crepes or something where
Oh,
they
that.
had incorporated the recipe that she requested. So, yeah, they do their best to really support, because of course, food is such a big part of our nourishment, our ability to focus on our studies, and a connection to home in so many ways. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
it's very common to see all kinds of cuisines, in the dining hall.
I love this whole idea of just, not just catering to student needs, but actually including them as part of the process.
Mhm.
That is clever. And also, like, it sounds like it was not, again, something that was developed as a strategy, but just because of the culture of who you are and what the institution is, it just became one of those things that people were just like, hey, what do you like to eat? I can make that for you, or give me that recipe, kind of thing. So,
Yeah,
um, especially as, yeah, for international students in particular, like, food is such a important aspect of what we associate home with, the others being like, whether it's music or television shows, etc. But like, foods just kind of tops that list, and in my opinion, but in my opinion,
absolutely.
food always tops the list.
Same here.
Again, Soka is quite different and quite special in terms of how it works with and for international students. Financial being a big piece of it, but culturally and just from the student experience standpoint as well. Being very student centric in everything you do, but also being international student centric, which is kind of hard to balance with domestic audiences. In some cases, domestic audiences kind of will actually find that that is appealing to them, to be surrounded by people from different countries and cultures. So, how do domestic students kind of feel about being at a university that is, it's still in the US, but it's majority, well, it's creeping towards majority, it sounds like, but it's at least half international and half domestic.
It's hard for me to describe how incredible our students are. on our campus. And they're truly drawn to the institution because of, again, our mission statement and what we're trying to do. And I think that really appeals to them. So they come. So we have a certain, type of student that comes to the university who cares about the world, who wants to make a mark and contribute. And so I think there's a natural curiosity and excitement to be surrounded by a diverse group of students, and so in many ways, there's already an expectation and excitement, a inclusion that's there. And of course, from the very beginning, even with student affairs and orientation week, orientation is set up to support international students and domestic students. And there's an awareness for maybe domestic students that come in that, half of your peers are international students. How do you keep that in mind from the very beginning? I think during residential life in my cure, one of the first things that we would do during orientation when we welcome students in the res halls was like, who traveled more than 5 hours to get here? Who traveled more than 15
Right.
hours, 25 hours, right? And so we would have students stand up and then sit down, and then the person that took, the longest, maybe 40 hours to get here, everyone clapped for them. And so there's
Oh,
this
wow.
awareness around international students from the very beginning. And I
Yeah.
think domestic students recognize that and understand that. And, I've heard so many students talk about during orientation or during classes how much there's like a group work and camaraderie about learning together instead of
Mm-hmm.
just like, in their separate zones of, they bring people together, they study together, they recognize that maybe for international students it takes a lot longer to read a reading than maybe someone that English isn't their first language, for example. So actually, that reminds me too, we have a required study abroad in our curriculum. All students are required to take 2 years of a foreign language, and they're also required to study abroad in that foreign language.
Oh, wow.
And so I think what's beautiful about that experience, one, for international students, they're oftentimes learning a third language and a second language, which is incredible in and of itself,
Yeah.
and required to do a study abroad after their own study abroad.
Yeah. I was like, the whole education is study abroad.
Exactly. But also what's I think so powerful and what I experienced personally as a domestic student at the institution was I, for the first time with my body and soul, understood the challenges of international students when I went abroad, in a way that I could have never, no matter how compassionate and empathetic I was being, could have never imagined
Mm-hmm.
until I had my own experience, right? And so there's, this awareness that comes for domestic students when they return from their study abroad of, wow, the sort of understanding and empathy towards international students of how much, how many challenges they must have faced already. And now this sort of camaraderie together, that there's this recognition and respect, right? That maybe, they didn't have an awareness of before. So I think it's truly a powerful experience for domestic students too.
That's amazing because it really does sound like Soka is a global institution. It doesn't mean that you have to have a campus in every country to be a global institution, but the fact that you provide the same experiences to students who are from the US to study another language and are required to study another language and are required to study abroad. And so you're really cultivating global leaders across the board, whether it's international students coming in or domestic students going out or the combination of the two. So it must take special types of domestic students, though, to want to come and to be interested in that level of like, okay, I really want to explore my horizons and expand my horizons rather, and see the world both at Soka with all these different people that I'm going to meet and all these different things I'm going to do, but also travel and learn from people elsewhere.
I agree. Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal, the students that we have here and how much they learn from each other. A big part of our campus also is they're required to live on campus for 4 years. And part of that truly is not just the education in the classroom, which is of course so important, but it's truly the education that happens in the residence halls with one another. And they live together on this campus, small population. They really have to get to know each other, um, connect, understand different worldviews that might be so different from their own, right? But they have to learn to respect each other. And it's almost like this microcosm of what we're trying to do on a greater scale on campus in person. And so in many ways, I think our students leave knowing, of course, this is just part of the liberal arts education that we offer too, but in addition to just the liberal arts piece, it's that piece of living on campus and learning to live with different kinds of people and perspectives. And so when they graduate and they go on to the workforce, they're already so skilled at some of those soft skills that can't be sometimes learned, but because of their experience being on campus for 4 years, they're able to build community with all kinds of people because they've done it already.
Yeah. Well, as a graduate of a liberal arts college at a STEM university, but liberal arts college, and currently working at a liberal arts institution, I wholly and solely believe in that whole exchange of ideas and information and thinking differently and thinking critically. Which brings me to my question around global issues, right? There are always going to be issues around the globe that people are aware of or maybe have different levels of awareness around and different perspectives about and different opinions. So speaking of liberal arts education and international students and creating that culture of exchange of ideas and information, how do you grapple with the more pressing issues of society and some things that happen out there that may or may not bring out the good and bad in people in a way that is constructive and helpful, as opposed to becoming sort of a microcosm of contention.
Truly, it's not easy, right? Of course, our ideal is to be able to create a space where through dialogue we can really understand one another and each other's perspectives and overcome some of these truly global issues. People have such strong worldviews based in their own sense, their own sort of cultural sense of justice and what that means and what it looks like. And how do two people who come from the same space of feeling like they're representing justice or, come together with different opinions and worldviews? And it's not easy, truly. But I think something that's been always beautiful is you're forced to see it and recognize it, right? No matter, when you're at a larger institution, you can ignore it. You can stick with the people that only have your worldview. You don't have to face anybody that you disagree with, and you can go about your life, But at an institution that's so small, you can't ignore each other. You're faced within the classroom, within the residence halls, to see and acknowledge those differences and somehow, come to a mutual understanding with one another.
And deal with that discomfort of being with people that may or may not agree with you.
Yes. And I think truly, that anecdote of like, or the example of diamonds rubbing against each other, to truly, that's what I feel our institution does is they have to rub against each other. They have to engage, and as a result, they're able to polish each other, through their different worldviews. And so I think it's difficult, but it's exactly what the university aspires and does on our campus.
Well, that is a beautiful analogy and perfectly said. And it really just inspires people like me to kind of continue to find, those opportunities to engage with people that I may have disagreements with, or it's everywhere. It's not just limited obviously to a campus culture or a campus in general. Society as a whole is getting very fragile, and I think there's just sensitivities are heightened, and yeah, how can we best learn from each other, and have those different worldviews represented on one campus in a way that we can just all engage and still walk away with feeling like we haven't lost our friends, like
Yeah.
we haven't we still have people, we still have community.
Yeah. I mean, I remember this example. Uh, 9/11 happened immediately following the opening of our institution. We opened, in 2001, September. And
Oh
so,
wow.
yeah, so, immediately that happened with the first incoming class of our institution. And they held a candlelight vigil. And there was one student, one actually pair of roommates. One was from the US, another was from Turkey. and they were engaging in dialogue. And this young man from Turkey was so frustrated by the narratives that existed at the time
Mm-hmm.
of folks from the Middle East and sort of the Islamophobia that happened all across the country during that time. And he really wanted to express, like, that the actions by these terrorists from 9/11 don't represent an entire people, an entire region of the world. And he was really determined as a student, from Turkey, to really represent what it looks like,
Yeah.
to so, just that powerful exchange between these roommates, one from the US, one from Turkey, and talking about these world events that were happening and sort of determining together, no matter what, that they would understand each other, exchange ideas, and then, somehow be a representation of what they want to see in
Of the
society.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so powerful.
Oh, that just gave me the chills. And I did not know before you just mentioned that that's when you opened, and what a way to kind of turn a tragedy into an opportunity to facilitate that level of you know dialogue. I could go on and on about this. I My last question really is about universities that want to create the sense of belonging for international students, where they do feel that this is their home away from home. What advice would you give institutions, regardless of their size, of how they might cultivate something even close to what you have created here?
The two things that sort of come to mind are mission and the student demographic, which is I've already shared, but truly what's led us to intentionally bring, these international students in and be as inclusive as possible, and breaking down, these barriers to make it as equitable for students, is really based on our mission. So for us, leaning into and centering our mission, it's been our guiding light in providing services and experiences for our international students. So I think looking at your institution, how your mission can include and connect and incorporate international students can be a great way, not only to think about how you can support these students more, but also it's a great way to pitch it to others, right? Like, this is based on our mission. This is who we are. So why don't we provide this service to ensure that these students are included? So I think my first advice would be really look at your mission and how does your mission connect to international students, and how do you make that argument? And then I think the second is, for us, they're just automatically part of our consciousness for every policy that we make, for every program, for everything that we do. They're just part of the consideration of the makeup of our institution and students. So in many ways, international student services isn't this side consideration. They're part of the conversation from the beginning in every discussion we have. And I think that's really been the key to our success in creating these inclusive spaces for them. So how do we do our work in a way where we're not thinking separately about the student population, but rather automatically include them in our decision-making process?
Well, those are great points to get people going. I can't imagine they are not already thinking about that, but they should be if they're not. And, sometimes again, mission becomes secondary. And, or really, it's not just secondary, but about what's just listed on the website as opposed to what is actually happening and what is the true reality of an institution's culture. And that, yeah, the whole word of mouth piece, I mean, it's not just about creating that culture for students here, but because it's the right thing to do. But if you do the right thing, you will get that word of mouth kind of reputation for being that place, that destination that others want to come to.
Yeah, I feel like a big part of our success has been our alumni. Our alumni have this incredible education, this experience, and they can't help but share, with their families, with their communities, their schools. And so we almost have like feeder schools and feeder individuals that, bring in more students from their
Mm-hmm.
country because of the experience they had, and they want to expand those opportunities for others too. So yeah, our alumni are pretty incredible in making sure that happens as well.
I bet. Ruby, again, this has been super helpful. And if people wanted to learn more about you and about Soka, or about just how you created this culture or contribute to this culture of inclusion for international students, or anything along the lines of what we've discussed today, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can go to Soka University's website at www.soka.edu. And under the staff directory, they can find me. And my email is rnagashima@soka.edu. So happy to connect with anyone that's interested.
That is Ruby Nagashima. So, rnagashima at soka.edu. Thank you, Ruby, so much once again for your time. And it's been a pleasure, and hopefully our paths will cross given that we live in the same state.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Kim.
This Pulse Check mini-series has been brought to you by Pathify. Gone are the days of clunky interfaces, disjointed systems, and massive, unhelpful link farms. Centralize all your systems with Pathify so that students see the information that matters to them in a digital experience that actually makes sense. From prospective students through alumni, it's about time the student experience started looking and acting like a consumer app from this century. Visit pathify.com for more. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.